So what's going on? What's new?
It's hard to roll into the cold open after such a good cold open.
I know.
We didn't record.
But the noise in the background would have ruined it anyway. So,
man, I've been listening to a couple local podcasts, nothing to do with business or analytics, and the cold open seems to be a popular approach. Like I think 3 or 4 of them I'd listened to did like just cold opens like we have been doing. So I don't know that we deliberately planned to do it, or maybe we did, but it just seems to work.
No, it was a little planned. It was kind of just taking a snippet from later in the episode and putting it right before the opening theme, but then just kind of coming in and just starting with just some kind of rambling, to kind of just get warmed up instead of just jumping right into the topic. No, it was kind of like in the design.
Well, I like it. It works. So
yeah,
what's new with you?
Parents' move is done. Settlement was yesterday. Major relief, the major weight lifted off my shoulders. Yeah. That and my siblings too. It was just with everything going on with them, and then the move on top of it. It was a crazy couple months, but now it feels good to have that be past. At this point, it was. I'm not gonna lie, I teared up a little bit Monday morning. My last kind of walk through the house before I started work, I quick ran over. They're 10, 15 minutes away. Just ran over and did one little walk through the house. It's all empty and everything's gone. And just one last time.
Yeah.
And, but they needed to, they needed to sell the house. With the condition that they're both in, you could see that the house was about to get away from them. Yeah. And then that's when the problems start.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were they in it?
37 years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we get attached to things, and there's, it's not necessarily the things, but the memories that were created with those things, I think is what we get attached to. I believe I was in my last home for 15 years. And when I sold it, everyone's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, just go. I just need to sit here for a while. And I sat on the front porch for an hour and just kind of soaked it all in. I'm like, this is hard. There's so many awesome things happened here,
Yeah. I was telling my wife, I said the railing coming down from downstairs, if you would hold on to it as you're walking down, it made this distinct sound. Yeah. Which is burned into my brain.
Yeah.
Where the creaks were as you're walking down, walking through the first floor. And 2 weekends ago. So when we moved in, excuse me, I was 4 and my sister was 2. And our first Christmas there, the family room was bare. It was just some folding chairs. And there's this old video of us just running around in circles in that room. So I caught a video of my son, my nephew, one of my sister's kids, and then my other nephew, who's my other sister's son, all running around in circles. In that room.
Awesome.
And I got a quick video of that. So,
that's very cool.
Yeah, you get the feeling of everything coming full circle.
Yeah, that's awesome. You need to put that together in one video snippet with the blur between.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things. My sister, she took all the VHS tapes and she's gonna work on getting them digitized. And then so I'll grab that clip and then the clip I got of them just running around in that room.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Wow.
But yeah, while it was bittersweet, a little bit of sadness, a twinge of this chapter's closing. There's so much exciting stuff in front. There's so much to be excited about, and it's going to be you can't hold on to everything for forever. At some point, you gotta let go of things.
Yeah, you do. It's still hard though.
So the big news today to tell everybody is speaking of letting go, we're ending the podcast.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. I thought that, it'd be a funny joke. No, we are not ending the show.
We're just getting our groove going here.
We are.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's good. I think we've been putting a lot into that, really trying to make it more thematic instead of just kind of like random ass conversations.
Random ass can be good though.
Yeah. Some of those are good.
So how are you going to segue into our topic today?
So passage of time.
Very good.
Passage of time.
Very good.
So, our theme has been around gaining experience in analytics the last several episodes. And like we've talked about it. We talked about schooling is great. It gives you some of the core skills that you need, but in reality, let's all face it, there's no better teacher than experience. And that itself only comes with time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can only gain experience through the passage of time. So what I want to focus today is really narrowing in on analytics and instrumentation and lessons we've learned through that. And again, we could read all of the various manuals and integration guides from all the various vendors out there on the core things that need to be done to implement any system. But there's only certain things you can learn by doing it. There's only certain things you can learn by pushing buttons and realize I can't push that button or shouldn't push that button. Never push that button again. You can only learn by doing certain things like that. So in our time with implementing analytics and martech solutions, what are some of the lessons we've learned? What do you think is the most important?
Man, I have so many thoughts. Okay, let me try to at least start with two, and I'm going to start with one that I wasn't planning on starting with, but Jen and I were talking this morning, and this topic came up a little bit, and so it's interesting timing. We were talking about how incredibly difficult it is to be experts on the schematics, I guess, for lack of a better term, the nuts and bolts of how martech systems work. Even if you try to be, it's very difficult. Things are so big, they change so quickly. There are a handful of experts, I would say, that dedicate almost their full time to it. I think 𝐖𝐡𝐞𝐫𝐞 is a good example of someone that has, at least from the outside, it appears to 100% be laser focused on Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. There are a few folks in the Adobe stack from an analytics or a launch perspective that have made that their laser focus, and they know every little tier. Here's a segue back to your cold open, that know every little creak and crack in the house and where all the squeaks are, and like they just know it because they live it all day every day. But for the rest of us, and I put us in that category, it is so incredibly challenging to know every little squeak of a system. Because they're just so big and they're changed so quickly that it's almost impossible unless you fully invest yourself all day, every day in those solutions. And so the question came up, what value do you give if you're not a focused expert in one specific solution? And my response was, experience is insanely valuable. We have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of implementations over 20 years each about that. You can't mimic that value with having deep understanding of the squeaks. And by that, I mean, it's one thing to know the technical schematics of how this thing works. It's another thing to be out in the wilderness faced with something that you don't know how to respond to unless you've seen something similar 1,000 times. Does that make sense? And I think that that's the value we bring. Now, we may not know like every little nuance of how Google Tag Manager works, but what we do know is the complexities of collecting data and centralized data collection in businesses using digital technologies. We've seen so many different iterations that we're able to advise and work with companies in a way that others simply can't. They just lack that deep, rich experience to be able to say, I've been in a situation just like this, or I've seen something similar, and I know the path we need to take in order to avoid this dangerous path over here.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. Because you start to maybe not know exactly some of the details, but like if you go down this route, this is what's going to happen. And like as you're talking, what I was thinking about is nothing ever goes perfectly to plan. And this is the difference between theory and practice. In theory, when you do A, B should happen. But in reality, you know that when you do A, it could be B.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something strange over here, it could be C. Because a lot of times when it just comes to the nuts and bolts of it, and the documentation or the instruction or the guidance around that, that's all done like in a pristine, clean environment. How many clients do we have that have pristine, clean environments? None whatsoever. There's always those things. So it's the experience that you're talking about that leads, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of the tool, but I've seen another client that has a very similar environment to this. And things went really sideways when we tried to follow to the schematic exactly. We had to adjust. So we can anticipate. What you're saying is we can anticipate those things where you need to adjust.
Yeah.
And so not to put words in your mouth, but that's the way I am interpreting
it. That's it. It comes with experience, right? And you can, I think, very, very quickly, you can become, if you're really laser focused on it, you can become technically proficient in a lot of things. And it could be martech, it could be coding, it could be playing the piano, it could be playing the guitar. I know people that have spent a lot of their time trying to pick up playing the guitar, and they 6-7 hours a day will play it. And in a relatively short period of time, a year or so, they have become technically proficient. They technically know the guitar, but there's still something lacking there. And that is the experience of playing the guitar. And you can be as technically sound as possible, but compare yourself to a master that's been playing for 30 years that may have the same level of technical understanding. There's simply something there at that master level that they can't replicate. And it's that experience that builds into becoming a master that you simply can't replicate compressed time. It takes time in order for that to play out. And then it's not to say that there isn't insane amounts of value to become technically proficient. That's part of the path to becoming a master. But that shouldn't be an endpoint, because that experience just makes that technical knowledge become more and more and more valuable.
You made me think of something I've been meaning to tell you, and I keep forgetting. So we're both a fan of Masterclass, and in all of our conversations, we talk in sports analogies.
Yeah.
So I saw there's a new Masterclass, and new meaning I've just came across it, from Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, very cool.
And I'm dying to sit down and watch it, because like years ago, like back when I was a kid, I remember reading an article about like some of the things his father did with him as a kid, because he showed proficiency at hockey. He's Canadian, so you're born with a hockey stick in your hands. And every kid in Canada plays hockey. Like every kid in America plays football or plays baseball, like one of those two sports. So his dad's seeing this proficiency, and he said one of the things his dad sat down with him, I think it was like 8 or 10 years old, he put the game on the radio, and he gave him just like a whiteboard. Or no, I think actually it was a chalkboard at that point. Chalkboard, and it had like, it was shaped like the rink with the net. He said, okay, now close your eyes and trace on the board where you hear the play-by-play guy is telling you where the play is going. Just trace. And it was one of these exercises, he said, that it was one of these subtle exercises that taught him how to anticipate the play. Like that, just doing that repetitiously, taught him, like, chances are, if the puck is heading in this direction, I should be here to anticipate it getting there.
So the question then is, what is the value of that versus then taking that framework and applying it to real world scenarios? And that's where my brain tends to go is, we study, we learn, we put ourselves in simulators, we go through all these scenarios, we create all these things in a clean laboratory that gives us the framework to make these things work. But the minute we step on the ice and someone, what is it, the Mike Tyson quote? There's a Mike Tyson quote, right? Hold on.
Okay.
It fits in really well here. Okay. So Mike Tyson's famous quote is, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." And so my question and I think it's a great analogy, is Gretzky thinking through those scenarios and how to anticipate, and now that gives him a mental model, a framework. But the minute you step on the ice and someone checks you into the board, do you have the ability to continue using that framework? Or you know what I'm saying? And it's like, okay, now I've added to the model. Wait a minute, that worked and I anticipated, but something weird happened. I didn't anticipate in all of my scenario training, I didn't anticipate this guy, cross-checking me from behind.
Mm-hmm.
Now
No,
I have
and
to add
that's
that to my
absolutely
model,
true.
right?
Yeah, and that's why he didn't have like a 100% shooting percentage. You're
Right.
going to miss at
Right.
times. You're going to get checked. But what the goal of that is so. Have you ever seen like Pee Wee soccer?
Oh yeah.
It's basically just a swarm of kids following. Yeah, exactly. Following the ball. What that taught him is don't follow the puck. Anticipate where the puck is going, because chances are everybody else on the ice is going to be following the puck. Don't go to where the puck is, go to where the puck will be. So where that helps you adjust is as you gain that anticipation. Yeah, you're not always going to miss the check. Sometimes you're going to, not anticipate it at all, but it gives you just that extra step to anticipate it. And I think coming back to our line of work, the repetition of going through projects that aren't always clean and just going through project after project after project, and maybe not having like being able to spout off details about spec and what every parameter does and every variable does and every setting does, but the repetition of going through project after project after project, it gives you that foresight to say, I've seen this before. We need to adjust. We need to plan to adjust so that we're not caught off guard. We don't get checked out of the blue. Like how many times have we been working on a project and we know 3 weeks before it's announced that it's going to be delayed? And I'm not talking about like the obvious signs like that they don't even have a homepage built. There's just certain things we hear that it's like, oh no, this is going to get delayed. And again, this is an easy example, but I think it's one of those things where I have advised clients like, I'm concerned. I'm seeing things that are going to tell us, that tell us that this is going to be delayed. We're going to miss this, or this problem is coming up. Oh no, it's fine. They keep telling us they're on target. I'm like, no, I'm seeing these little signs that tell me they're not.
Yeah, and how much of that, I think it's a good segue, kind of talking about these like maps and mental models. How much of that knowledge of just having seen it before is, I guess maybe a two-part question. One, can that be passed on, or is that something that is only 100% in your head? And that leads to like, I guess the second part of the question. Can we or should we be doing a better job of leaving maps behind for those people that follow us? And my line of thought here is that we do a horrible job in martech of keeping a travel journal. And we go on this adventure, we go on this travel, and we learn all of these things. We learn all these things we didn't know before that could be extremely valuable for the next person that takes that same journey. Yet we go down that path, and then we leave, and then someone else comes in and goes down that same path for the first time. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and it goes back to the recent episode we had around mentoring, because I can't tell you how many times in my career, early in my career, the mentoring it's not just telling someone about it, it's telling them about it all the time and pointing it out and saying, make sure you recognize this. This is the third time we've talked about this. We'll start to recognize this pattern or this behavior. I think, absolutely, like that is something where, mentoring comes in so you can pass that down to others. It's almost like, it's like when you have a kid, don't touch it, it's hot. Don't touch it, it's hot. Kids are still going to touch it because they're they're hearing you, but they're not completely processing it. I think it's the same thing where this is a problem. This is a problem. This delay is not minor. This is major. And again, I'm struggling to come up with a good example right off the bat. But mentoring, it gives you a chance to repeat that to someone who doesn't have that experience more often, so they can learn it faster.
Do you think that is the obligation of companies to make happen? Is it hard? Is it maybe it's too hard to force that to happen? Like, what environments have you been in where you've seen mentoring work the best? And let's stay focused on martech. Like, what environments have you been in where like this company had it together? Either it just happened organically, maybe because of their culture, or they specifically deliberately put something in place, but this company had a set of mentors that made their people coming up through the ranks much more valuable.
In martech, I really can't say. I think, well, on the agency side, I'll be honest, a lot of it's cutthroat.
Agency life sucks. Let's just
it
call
does.
it what it is.
So I think back to like 2 different agencies I was at. You know, when you got knowledge, you hoarded it.
Yeah.
Because that's your promotion, that's your next bonus, that's your next raise, is you having that information. You don't want to share it. And then, in those cases, you know, they had like the co-op programs, but again, I wouldn't say it was necessarily like a healthy mentoring relationship. I mean, I think I feel I was lucky in the first job I had out of college, where there was just this natural rapport between me and 2 of the more senior members of the team there, where it was this gradual thing where they just kind of took me under their wing and showed me the ropes. And it's something that cannot be forced. Like, and that's the thing is like, it cannot be a formal mentor program, because that doesn't work too, because it's forced, it's fake, it's not genuine. Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't think it's an obligation of companies to do, because it's either a marketing gimmick that they put out there that we, look at us, we're mentoring the next generation, and there, a lot of those new folks to the space, or a lot of the college students, like they're just they're just free labor to them. So it's more of something. It's got to be on an individual level.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like for those that really care about it, they have to take the reins. And that's why, I've loved our conversations with Stephen Marshall at East Tennessee State University, because he's been building something grassroots there and getting other people in the university on board with how to truly help set up those students with real mentors, not the phony mentor program.
Yeah, no, he's doing some awesome things. So a couple thoughts on this, and hold on, I'm going to take a note because I don't want to forget one of the topics I want to come back to. So I think the one organization I was in that did it really well, and I don't think it had anything to do with the well, I take that back. It had something to do with the management team, and that the people they hired were the right people that had the mentality of wanting to mentor. But my early days at Omniture were phenomenal, and I'll name a few people, but I even feel bad doing that because there were so many people that were just driven to give back and teach and train. And the people I remember the most were Brett Gunderson, Steve Hammond, I'm Tim Lott, and I think all 3 of those are still at Adobe in fairly influential and high positions at this point, which makes sense. But they were so phenomenal in helping me, and I was new to the martech space when I joined, and again, it wasn't like any kind of a formal, these are the mentors and it just happened organically. And I think part of it was just the right people. And so that was an awesome experience for me. And then I want to say that the analytics space, the people involved just tend to be pretty giving. It's been awesome that people want to give back. And I found a lot of success and happiness doing that on Twitter. Like this was a decade ago, helping people. And unfortunately, the analytics community died on Twitter. I don't know if it was because of the Slack channel, Pound Measure, that was set up, or Pound Measure was set up because the community died on Twitter. I dislike the Slack, but so many people love it. Jen is such an amazing contributor there. It works for her. It doesn't work for me, so I'm kind of missing out on that fulfillment because I don't like interacting there. But I've personally found, and I do much less mentoring around analytics these days. The team we have here is definitely much smarter than me when it comes to analytics. I'm finding my fulfillment on LinkedIn and Twitter, helping mentor people just on business in general and building companies, and that has been very fulfilling for me. But I think you're right. It's giving people that have the desire to do it the right platform. So while you may not force it in such a way where you say, okay, Jim's a mentor now, and if you're new to the company, if you join 33 Jim is going to be your formal mentor for the next 6 months. Excuse me. I don't think that works. I think that's too forceful. But I think what does work is being deliberate and saying, hey, we have people like Jim that are great mentors. Let's not force it by setting up a program where Jim's the mentor, but let's create an environment that fosters his ability and desire to be a mentor. And that's a subtle difference, but I think it's one that makes a world of difference in how it actually plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. It has to be genuine and it has to be authentic. It can't be forced. It can't be planned. Yeah. It has to happen. And it's one of those things where you just have to set the environment and walk away.
I agree. So one of the notes, I'm going to go back and look at your topic, because when I was looking at your topic, it got me thinking. So you said lessons learned, implementation. Okay. One of the big things that I've learned, and I just took a note of, and I've actually been talking about it on LinkedIn the past couple of days, if you've seen it. And my question was, actually, you know what? I'm going to pull it up. Hold on. We're going to have all this great unfilled, uncomfortable.
I'll clean it up.
Airtime. No, I don't think we need to clean it up even. I think it works. Okay. So here was my question I posed on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of pretty good interaction on this post. So my question was, when deploying martech solutions, how much, if at all, do you think about the person that will take over maintenance of the deployed solution after you leave? That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our experience, I believe people think very, very little about that.
I would agree.
Yeah, we think, so maybe let's talk a little bit about what we've learned on why that happens. One, it may just be people just don't care. That's definitely a possibility, right? Like this is my job. My job is to do X, Y, and Z. It's to put widget A into slot B. Not my concern who comes after me. So, I mean, I definitely think it could be a personal thing. It's definitely a challenge with investment in martech. You know, we've seen this time and time again where we have companies spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on licensing fees for platforms. And okay, you two people, you're in charge of deploying and maintaining everything. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. This is not possible. So it becomes difficult to even think about, you know, you're so underwater all the time. It's like, how can you think about anything other than just mere survival? Mm-hmm. And to add on to that, you have business stakeholders that fail to see the long-term vision. And you may want to think about your predecessors. No. What is it that people
not my predecessors,
the opposite of predecessors.
Successors.
The people that come after you, you may want to think about them, but your stakeholder pushes back and says, no, like it's more important. Like we have these 50 pixels we have to get out. Well, what are you thinking? We can't think about documentation or sustainability. Like we have a launch, we need to get these 800 custom events wired in the next 3 days, and it's like that all the time. So it just adds to this overwhelmingness of trying to be able to keep up. It's like, how can you think of to say, look, I need 30% of my time to slow down and think about sustainability, to put documentation into place, to build things that the person that comes after me, because I'm not going to be here forever, can easily pick up. It's a really, really difficult challenge. And I think it's one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last decade from an implementation standpoint is that most stakeholders are not visionaries. They're middle managers that are pushing papers around and managing HR. They're not visionaries. If they were, they'd be able to see the big picture that yes, it costs more up front to slow down. We lose time. We take time to put documentation and other things that don't come right out and are shown as a result. But in the long term, not making that investment is way more costly. We've lost track of the number of businesses we've seen that have been absolutely buried in technical debt, that are spending so much budget on maintenance, trying to maintain something that's falling apart. And so we're extra spending on maintenance, where we have opportunity costs, but we don't see it because our stakeholders often lack that vision. And so I think it's a challenge, and it's the reason, honestly, why we're talking still about foundational implementation issues in martech. We're having conversations. I mentioned this to, can't remember who I was talking to, someone that's been around the block a few times. I mentioned to him on LinkedIn, it's like we're stuck in this vicious cycle because we're unwilling to make investments that have sustainability in mind. Is it any wonder why a conference you and I sat next to each other at in 2006, we're still having that same discussion in 2021? Like, what are we doing here? But it makes sense. We're struggling to evolve because we're so, at this point in time, we've dug ourselves such a deep hole. I don't know how we get out of it. It's going to be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you put a lot. That was a lot there to unpack. But there were two things in there that I had on my list. That you mentioned, that lessons learned and stuff to try to avoid is to your point. Like, there are people in our space that are just, you're constantly rushing. You're constantly rushing from one thing to the next. So you don't have time to document it. You don't have time to really think it's through. I've got to get this thing done because then I have to get something done after that, and then there's a third thing quickly following upon that. So there's this constant rushing, because what we do has been made to appear so easy. It's just to play this tag, and the whole solution works, which is not the case. And the other thing you brought up, technical debt. The one thing I want to spend some time talking on is, everybody's need to instrument everything. I mean, and that's something I've learned the hard way over the years, because I was that person early on. That's like, oh, we have all of this data. Let's wire it all up. Let's make sure we get it all. And I was talking with a client today, and they admitted, like, they fall into the habit of comparing themselves to other organizations in the space, and like, they're doing all of this stuff, and they have to constantly remind themselves, well, they're 5 years ahead of us. It took them 5 years to get there. We're not going to get there right away, and we have to take our baby steps. And that's where I was talking about, like, I'm like, and avoid that big mistake of having to have everything. Focus on what you need. And I, again, use the hoarder analogy that we've used so many times before. How many times have we seen organizations where they have all of this data being collected, but none of it's being used?
Yeah.
The data is piled up in the dining room. You can't get to the dining room table. The basement is chock full of data, and you've got this little path to get from the basement back upstairs.
Yeah.
But none of it's being used. You have all of it, but it's being used, and it's quickly degrading.
Did you see my video that I posted where I was playing the ukulele?
I did.
It's a lot like that. So I use the analogy for those for probably most of you that didn't see that video I posted on LinkedIn or Twitter, maybe both. We see the same thing in lots of different areas of life, and I see this in music. And when I first started playing the bass guitar, the story I told is I had a bass and I had an amp, and that was it. And then the more I got into it, then the more I saw what other people were doing. It's like, well, I need like these 5 pedals, and then I need this gadget, and then I need this thing, and then I need this like digital processor, and oh, now I need like a pedal board, and I need these 20 pedals. And it's like, you get to a point where you have so much stuff that it's actually taking away from your ability to create music. And I'm like, why do I need all this stuff? It's like I'm buried in this debt of all this stuff. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to simplify down to a few things that I really need. And only then did it become enjoyable once again. And I was actually able to do something that I could create some sort of output from. And we see this in analytics a lot. You know, you get an analytics solution and it's like, okay, we have a few things. We have a guitar and an amp and we're creating music. This is awesome. And then we look over, it's like, well, wait a minute. They have all these super cool things in their analytics. We need those. And I went to this conference and they were talking about all these super cool things. So we need to add that into ours. And all of a sudden you end up with this thing that you're just absolutely buried, and then you look around and everyone's like, I'm confused. Why aren't we creating music? Why aren't we getting value? We have all this stuff. It's like, it's overwhelming. We're buried. Like some of it doesn't work. Like I have these 14 pedals chained together and I'm not getting any sound. There's something broken in the linkage. And it's only when get to that point and we're able to say, this is okay, we can scale back, which most companies don't have the backbone to do, because we can't say that we failed. You know, we have to keep going more and more, so they don't. But the companies that do say, you know what, that was a great learning experience. We now know what works and what doesn't. We're going to scale back to something that is manageable, that we can actually use, and we can actually create some output from. Those are the companies that I think are truly getting value. And that's another great learning that we've seen from an implementation standpoint. The beefiness of your implementation is not directly correlated to the value of your analytics practice. I think that is a fundamental lie that we have told ourselves, that the complexity of your implementation is directly correlated to the value you're getting out of your analytics. Rarely is that true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the reason that false correlation is made is, the correlation, the false statement is made based on that correlation is because it's easy to see. We're collecting 150 different dimensions, and we're collecting 200 different events. Isn't that great? But how many of them are broken? How many of them were rushed out the door and not implemented well? So you don't know if they're working correctly.
And not only that, going back to my point of, and you have 2 people to try to keep this stuff running and figure it out. And so what often happens is someone on the team will raise the flag and say, well, wait a minute, we have these like 50 dimensions we're capturing. It looks like it's capturing data, but I'm not sure of the integrity of that data. You know what the business will often say? Well, we've already been using it. We don't have the time to go back and check it. We'll just go with it. Like, what are we doing? Is this really theater? This is where we're at? Because that's what it feels like a lot of times, you know, that it's theater. If we really cared about the validity of the data because it was informing what we were doing from a business perspective, we should care, right? That's like saying, hey, Jim, the gas tank is showing we're on empty and the little indicator's on says we need gas soon. I mean, it's been like that forever. We don't even know if it's valid or not. So we don't have time to slow down. Let's just keep going. You know, It's like, what? Why do we have an indicator at all then? This is silly. You know, It's just for show. Maybe it's just a sticker and it doesn't really even measure anything. But for a lot of these organizations, and people will probably get mad at me for saying this, it might as well just be a sticker, a static sticker that's not measuring anything, because so many of these organizations are so removed from the actual outputs of the business that it has become a game to them. And to your point, the cutthroat nature of business is that they really don't care about the impact it has to the business. They care about the optics of it as it relates to their ability to increase their salary and their title.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So, and that's hard to manage against, you know?
It is.
especially in big companies.
It is. And I think like going back to how we started this and, you know, the we were asking about is like, what's more valuable, the technical deep knowledge of the spec or the experience of going through this? This is exactly where the experience is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Because when you do get that stakeholder at a business that's in this position who is listening to it, the experience of here's the problem, this is this is the trouble you're having, and here's how you get out of it. You know, that's when you have, you know, a phenomenal engagement that actually is tremendously successful.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep. So, but I mean, and again, that this is just the stuff that comes with the passage of time. You know, you can't, you know, it's like that the person who hits 22, 23, you know, they've got like their first full-time job and they're out there, they want the fancy car, they want a nice big house because, you know, that's where, you know, their parents are at. Well, they didn't see the 30 years it took their parents to get there.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like you gotta go on that journey of like the used car, the small apartment before you can get to something else.
Yep. Ain't that the truth? Those are my learnings. So I think those are the big ones that I've definitely walked away with.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing I was thinking into this. I mean, like, yeah, there's little things here and there, but I the more I think about it, the one lesson I've really learned over the years is don't instrument everything.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And to your point too, is leave something behind for the person who's coming after you.
Yeah. And to follow up on your point, I gave a talk at one of Observe Point's conferences. And one of my last slides on my presentation was, don't instrument something unless you're also committing to actively maintain that thing that you're instrumenting. If you can't make that commitment, don't do it. But people will do it anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, again, it's just a quick way of saying, yep, we did it,
Yep.
we deployed it, and
Check it off
it's
the list. Give me my bonus.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Frustrating.
Incredibly. No, I'm thinking of a couple things right now, but I don't want to go on a rant. So
fair enough.
We'll just leave
save
it
that
at
for another time.
Exactly. Or people could just look back to our data hoarders episode. We went on a couple rants about that.
Maybe we should have a what's the platform? What's the platform that creators can set up accounts on and people can fund their content?
GoFundMe?
No.
Patreon?
Right, like maybe we should set up a Patreon, and for those that sign up for our elite level, we'll get an unfiltered podcast where we just like don't hold back. It's like this is the business friendly version. If you want to support our Patreon, we'll give you the full unedited no holds barred version.
33 tangents unfiltered.
33 tangents after dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be interesting. I'm going to think about that one.
All right. Might get us in trouble, but who cares?
Well, I mean, like, you know, like going in, like, because it was funny. I was talking with Tony earlier, and, you know, it's like, you know, I gave the analogy of how we pitched this. It's like, you know, imagine you're in a coffee shop and you walk past a couple people talking about work. What it would sound like? And he goes, yeah, you're leaving out all the cursing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm like, yeah, we are. But maybe if we do
a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a secondary version that is a premium paid version that's unfiltered.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
You got me thinking now.
All right.
Yeah. Because my plan is after vacation, I'm coming back and hitting the content stuff hard.
Cool.
So who knows? Maybe by August, we might have an unfiltered podcast.
We shall see.
Well, cool, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yep. All righty. Catch you later.
Bye.